This is 101, week 8.1, but this is actually for all my students. Today's lesson, you're not going to make it. I don't recommend watching this all in one go. Today I am teaching the thing that I hate teaching the most. It is my least favorite thing in the world to teach, and I can't stand it. We have to do it. It's one of those things we have to do. Don't treat this like just if you take a break, get a sandwich, come back, keep going. You don't need to do this all in one go. The reason I mention this, what I'm about to teach you today, I need to teach you how to quote and paraphrase and summarize, and I need you to teach you about MLA citation, and I need you to teach you about research. I don't know if I'll get to all that today, but we'll see. Um, it's not hard. It's not hard. It is extremely important because it's one of those things you have to know how to do as a college student for the entire time in college. It's not difficult, except it is incredibly boring. So it's not hard to do, but it's dull. And because it's dull, people will be like, I'm bored, and they're going to stop doing it. In which point you will not know how to do it. And you'll be like, oh, I can't do that. That's too hard. It's not too hard. It's very, very easy. The hard part is, can you stay awake and learn it? But it's not hard to learn. It's not complicated. We got to do it. I hate it, but we got to do it. It just drives me nuts. And I'm going to zip through some of this stuff relatively quickly because I think some of this stuff is pretty simple. But for those of you in my classes, I have this thing that I have for you called Citation. Citation, MLA, and research. If you're on Blackboard, by the way, for a lot of you guys, this is going to be located in a folder at the bottom of the assignments page on Blackboard. But you know what? It can be different in future semesters. And anyway, for 101, this is an actual lecture because you have to learn 101. But my other students might want this to review because a lot of your teachers maybe didn't teach it really well, or you had trouble learning it because it was so fucking boring. So let's go over it pretty solidly. Okay, so most teachers, there's a book you can get on how to do this stuff correctly, and the book is like hundreds of pages long. What I did was I took everything you need. This is what I do in my whole career, but I took everything you need to know and I boiled it down to a very small handout. Now I realize it doesn't seem small to you because you're like, this fucking thing is 10 goddamn pages long, but I swear to God, it was like 200 pages long, and I cut it down to 10. That's pretty good. Now, what I'm going to teach you how to do is three things. Citation is when you use someone else's work in your paper, but you give them credit for it. See, plagiarism is when you use someone else's work in your paper and you make it look like it's your work, and it's not, and that's plagiarism. Citation is when you use someone else's work and someone else's words or ideas in your paper, but you say where you got it from, which is good. You should do that. It's perfectly good to like read things and quote them and discuss them. So there's three parts to this. One, which is how do you put other people's ideas and words into your paper correctly? Number two, all the bullshit technical information that has to go at the bottom of the paper. Students tend to think about this as footnotes, but it's not footnotes. But it's like the publisher and the date of publication and boring shit like that. And then the third part of this is how do you know that anything that you mentioned in your paper is worth quoting in a college paper? And that is a sort of trickier thing, right? Because it's one thing you want to use other people's work correctly, and then you want to give all the technical information at the bottom of the paper like you're supposed to. College expects you to know how to do this, even though I think it's a fucking waste of time, but whatever. And then you got to know, is it worthy of being quoted? Because sometimes students will quote shit and they'll quote it correctly, and they'll put all the information at the bottom of the paper correctly, but what they've chosen to quote is fucking garbage. So let's figure out, let's do those three things. Let's learn how to quote, and then let's learn about that technical information. Okay. We're going to learn how to quote and paraphrase and summarize, which is using other people's work in your paper, and then we're going to learn the technical information, and then we're going to learn if it's worth, how do you know what's worth quoting? That last lesson is actually pretty important, and it's more interesting than the other two. So, the first thing I want to tell you about the handout that I've made for you, which is called the citation handout, is that I stripped this down to be as simple as humanly possible. There are a million variations of these things, how to quote. Like there's a lot of little, if you want to do this, do it like this. If you want to do this, do it like this. If you want to do this, do it like this. I tried to just keep it super, super simple. So there's a bunch of stuff that I'm not going over how to do. For example, if you want to quote more than a few sentences at once, you do this thing where you like indent the quote, so it's like a little block of words. Instead of putting quotation marks, you like drop it down and push it over. I'm not going over how to do that because I don't think you should be quoting that much at one time. There are ways to cite personal interviews and paintings, but since my classes don't teach personal interviews and paintings, I'm not teaching how to do that. There's ways to quote dialogue. I don't think we need to go over that right now, although I suppose some of my students might need that. But again, I keep it so short, you don't need it. There's all kinds of funny variations. I'm going to tell you, for example, mention the name of the author before every quote. Do you have to? Well, no, but then you have to learn this variant way to do it. So it makes life easier if you just use the author's name before any quote. What if you're quoting more than one thing by the same author? And that happens sometimes, but I'm not concerned about that right now. What if you want to put a quotation in, but you want to delete a little bit in the middle and keep going? You could put like a dot, dot. I'm not going over how to do that. You probably don't need to do that right now. There are some special rules for poems. There's special rules for Plato. There's special, well, and I'm sorry for that one. I know I gave my one-on-one class Plato. Don't worry about it right now. Just stick with page numbers. But there's special rules for things like the Bible and the poetry of John Milton. And, anyway, there's a million things I could teach you. I could spend the rest of my life on all the sort of variants for this. But I don't want to do that right now. I'm trying to keep this as simple as humanly possible. So I think that's it for now. And let's now we can head on. That's basically what I cut a lot of stuff out of this to make it as simple as humanly possible. What boils down to it. There's a lot of like, well, what if I want to do this? There is a way to do that thing that you want to do, but you got to look up how to do it. And I swear to God, it's huge. It's like a massive fucking book. And actually, one of the books that I have is it's like 500 pages. And so because government documents are quoted slightly different from personal interviews, or quoted slightly different from ancient poetry, or quoted slightly different from music, or quoted slightly. It just takes forever. Okay, so, all right, let's go through this and start with citation. So citation is using other people's words and ideas in your paper. That means if you want to discuss it, if you're going to quote a poem, if you're going to quote a film, if you're going to quote Plato, whatever you're going to quote, whatever you're going to put in your paper, there's a proper way to do it. So let's start with that. So right now I'm on this sort of first page here. Citation, quotation, paraphrase, and summary. So if you're using someone else's words in your paper, or words and ideas in your paper, there are multiple. The word citation is funny. Students expect me to say quotation. Quotation is when you use the exact words that somebody else said. Paraphrase is that thing where you put it in your own words. And summary is when you take something really long and you squish it down into just you take a whole book and you tell me what happened in it in a couple of sentences. All three of those things involve taking someone else's words and ideas and putting them into your paper. So all three of those things need you to explain where you got them from. Otherwise, it's plagiarism because you don't want to make it look like it's yours. So, but they're slightly different. Citation is the fancy word that is used to describe all three of those situations. So that's using someone's exact words, using their ideas, but putting it in your own words, and then taking something long like a book and summarizing it in a couple of sentences. All three of those things, you're taking someone else's words and ideas and you're putting them in your paper. And for all three of those things, you got to tell me where you got it from. So then the question becomes, how do you tell me where you got it from? It's not difficult, but it's boring. All right. So let's start with this. So the first thing you got to know is you're gonna need a couple of things. I'm gonna need to know the name of the person that you're getting this from. That's an easy one. I got to know the name of the person you're getting this from. Also, they probably put it in a book or an essay or a song or something. So I'm gonna need the title of the thing that they wrote it down in, right? So like Plato is the author, and he wrote a book called The Phaedrus. So before you quote from Plato's Phaedrus, you got to say, in Plato's Phaedrus. That way, I start the quotation off by knowing the exact name of the author and the name of the book. Is there a way to quote something without mentioning the name of the author or the name of the book? Yes, there is. Don't do that for now. If you desperately want to know how to do that, learn to do it somewhere else. I'm keeping this shit simple. So say the name of the author and the name of the book, and it'll make life easier. The third thing you're going to need before introducing a quote, and this is a trickier one, and students hate this, you got to say why the author is important. You got to tell me just 2, 3, 4 words about the author, so that I have some idea why I should pay attention to them or believe them. So for Plato, you're going to want to say, ancient Greek philosopher Plato, in his book Phaedrus, says, ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. Because otherwise, anyway, I'll pick it up in the next video. But that's the gist of it. I need the name of the author, I need the name of the book, and you got to tell me why this author is worth paying attention to. Okay, I'll see you in the next video.